Hello, everyone. So welcome to the Queerness Diaries. Today, I am joined by Joseph Rulli. Is it Rulli?
Rulli, yeah.
Rulli, yeah, because I ordered with the pronunciation for that.
Yeah.
And
I should be in Southern Italy right now.
Yeah. So joining me all the way from overseas in the US. And so I would like to have you introduce yourself to everyone first so they can get to see you, and then we'll start to talk about your story, and you've got quite the story to tell.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I have been I'm in Chicago presently in the United States, and I've been here since 2006. Yeah. I'm originally from South Bend, Indiana, which is about 150 kilometers east of Chicago. So an easy train ride, two-hour train ride back and forth. I have, I'll just go right into it. Yeah, I've been here for, like I said, since 2006, and I'm writing now. I'm a writer, 3 books on Chicago labor history, one satirical novel, and 1 play already produced in 2016, satire, and another political farce coming up in October that we're producing.
Yeah, it's super exciting. Yeah, I saw on your LinkedIn. It must be such a great achievement, and you should be so proud of it. Like, I think the things that happen in our lives, especially when we enjoy things like writing, they help with the creativity. Like sometimes the craziness of the world and the darkest times we go through can spring up, amazing creativity. And I think for you, you've really found something, that you're so passionate about, and I'm so glad that you're thriving in it. And
thank you.
Yeah, October's
thanks for the platform. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So,
but yeah, so what I thought we'd do, so we always go through, basically, like I said, through the sort of chapters of your life and everything that's sort of led you to where you are today. So I wanted to talk at first with you about your experience growing up and how that was through your early years up into being a teenager and through those times.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I am Gen X, child born in the mid 60s, but don't remember anything of the 60s. So I'm not that old. But, very much grew up in the 70s and came of age in the 80s, sort of alongside the AIDS explosion, which kept me closeted even longer. But anyway, I think looking back, what I know now and knowing myself back then, I knew I was gay from age 8 on, but I never could have put it in any terms. Just in the last half century, I can't believe I have memories that are half a century old. Good thing though, I'm a history nerd because I think that's fascinating. So
yeah, it's true.
But the word queer, I mean, it was only used when I was growing up as an insult. And so that has taken me a very long time. And I can say probably honestly that it's only been in the last couple of years that I've been comfortable actually using the word as a descriptor and not as a pejorative. So that was a long time in coming, because I'd hear that word and know it was, know what it meant, know who it was meant for, and made everything to make sure that it wasn't focused on me. So deep in the closet, even when I was riding my bike as a kid, I remember I called it my cruising phase, that I would ride my bike around the parks and watch kids older than me playing basketball or cutting the grass, with their shirts off. It was just this huge thing. And the styles of the 70s were very short shorts for guys.
So I could imagine.
And then when I was in junior high, I played baseball just because that's what all my friends did, and I was not good at sports. When I got to high school, my dad asked me to try out for wrestling because my older cousin had done it and just loved it. And it gave him, a lot of discipline, a lot of, good. And it was an incredible workout. So I did it for 4 years. And I remember when I was in therapy, I was 42. And I told my therapist that I was really stressed out from grade school on up playing basketball.
Yeah.
In junior high and early grades, and then wrestling. And every time I even had a practice, the butterflies in my stomach would just be going crazy, and I'd be really like hating it. And she goes, "Well, why do you think that is?" I said, "I have no idea." She goes, "You're in a locker room with other guys, and you haven't gotten that level of acceptance, And she said, "That's probably what it was." So it never really clicked at that time. I just always knew it just brought on these feelings of anxiety that I just bottled up and never dealt with them until I was an adult. So anyway, sports was never my glory time. I was relatively popular as a kid. I was very quiet in elementary school and in junior high. And very quiet. I had a lot of friends who were sort of good athletes, and they always accepted me because I was, I was friendly, and it was even, I tried, because I knew what it was like to be picked last, and so I tried to be nice to the kids who were not popular. It was just like I sort of knew it, but I never would get so close to them that anybody could make any kind of comment about. Or whether it was gay or whether it was, hanging out with, the losers, And in high school, I kind of came out of my shell. I began to sort of, I was never the class clown because I was too afraid to get in trouble, but I was always making humorous comments and I think witty banter, both with teachers and with other students. By the time I got to college, I was very focused on teaching and I was focused on studying history. So I did really well. Later on, through what I'll talk about, during therapy, I was diagnosed with ADHD, which I know I had all my life, but I had it before the term was invented. So I had always made, I would underline stuff that I was reading. I would reread stuff. I would make outlines. I would highlight, what I was reading. And that helped me. And then when I was in college, sometimes I'd have 2 and 3 research papers in a semester. So I had developed this card system of note-taking, and everything was coded as to what was my source, what project it was at. So about midway or towards the third of my 4 years in college, I decided to focus on going into the seminary for the Catholic priesthood. So I was at Notre Dame, so that was kind of easy. So I finished my degree in history, and then had my teaching experience, and then went into seminary. I was in southern Indiana, a little town called St. Meinrad, which actually was founded by Swiss Benedictines. In the 19th century. And so it was this Benedictine monastery in southern Indiana, the birthplace of the Ku Klux Klan. So this bizarre little haven of German immigrants. And they started this monastery. So I had some good training there. And that's where I had, I had been closeted my whole life. Never talked to anybody about it. I was aware by the time I was in my middle college days, I was aware of my attractions more than I'd ever accepted before. But I'd still go, I was going to dances with girls. But I was thinking about guys in my dorm. I was thinking about guys in the shower. I had been introduced to pornography when I was in middle grades. I would go to my uncle's barbershop and clean his basement, and he had boxes of pornography. They were all heterosexual, but I was, looking at the guys. And but again, even that never did that dawn on me. I never explored anything further of that. And when I was in seminary, I had actually had a guy come on to me. And he wasn't my type, and I was nice about it, and He was the first one I told I'm gay, but I'm not interested. And he was amazed that at 22 or 23, I had never been with guy or girl. And so that year was very strange. Seminary life in the late 80s was very strange. It was sort of still the residual of the 70s and 80s where, pretty much anything went. You could have been gay, but you never talked about it. There were some very strange behavior things that were permitted, not really encouraged, but they certainly weren't stopped. So it was just a strange time. And then coupled with that, like I said, by the time I was in late high school and college, the AIDS crisis had really become front and center. So anybody who outed themselves or were outed, the only concern was that you were going to spread AIDS. That was it. And it really didn't change until early on, even. I can't remember when exactly, but a boy by the name of Ryan White, he was 8 years old in Indianapolis, Indiana, actually. And he was a hemophiliac and got AIDS from a blood transfusion. And this was in the early days before testing. So that sort of changed the face of the crisis, but not enough to stop any kind of bigotry. And, the Reagan administration certainly didn't do anything to slow anything down. So it was just an odd, I can't imagine. That's what it was when I was out and about, and before I was out, and then when I actually came out, it was still so much part of the landscape.
I can imagine.
But so after my first year, I had spent a summer back in my diocese. The northeastern section of Indiana was sort of the jurisdiction of my section of the church. So I did work in a parish, and I went back to seminary. And I had met a guy who was studying for the same diocese as me, but he went to a different seminary. He was a year younger, and he was just graduated from college. Fell head over heels for him. And he visited me in the parish where I was over that first summer. And I remember I was so torn with feelings for him, but I never tried anything. He even threw me hints. It was like,
you just had that. Like that fear, I think.
Too afraid. So it wasn't until the next year, actually, that he and I sort of messed around. Nothing fully, but just messed around a bit. But when I went back to seminary, I met a guy who was in his first year, but he had been to seminary college. So he was much more experienced in the, not just the closeted lifestyle, but he was already out. So he and I became really good friends. And by the end of the year, I had my first experience with him. And it was a strange time because we were still closeted, even though by this time I had been out to a few people. But still still playing the role, playing the part. And then I had done a year internship after my first 2 years, and then back to seminary for the last 2 years. But even in that time, for 3.5 years, he and I were together. We had hooked up at what would have been called hooked up now, but we didn't call it anything then. But it was very strange. We were so secretive and so terrified of getting caught and getting kicked out. So I just bottled it up again. And then when I was ordained in 1992, and he and I were very clear, very naive, but we were very clear that, okay, we're taking vows. No problem here. And there is about where he was from is in Kentucky, and I was from northern Indiana. So there was, just to give you an idea, it was about 350 kilometers. I did my research to convert miles to kilometers. We're so damn stubborn here. So it's about 350 kilometers away. So we both thought, okay, great, no problem. Well, and we never did anything after that. But I was really naive about just the internal cost that would exact on me. Because, as I tell people, in my 14 years of the priesthood, I did not break my vows. I did not break the law. I think a gay priest in the 21st century has to say that, just to make sure people are clear that there's differences. And I never crossed those lines. However, I had, like I said, it exacted a huge toll on me psychologically. And so I crashed in the spring of 2006. I had a major emotional breakdown. And I had been talking with a woman who she eventually outed me to the bishop.
Yeah.
And at the time, he was possibly one of the most homophobic bishops in the country. But if you watch, to his credit, if you watch the movie Spotlight, which is the story of the Boston Globe breaking the first early story of the cover-up of the church in Boston with the molestation stuff. Well, my bishop at the time in the 80s, and the 70s, he was the assistant bishop to Cardinal Law. So he was the one who wrote the letter that said, you have got to get rid of these guys. You can't keep moving them. And when that letter was found by the reporters, that proved that the cardinal was lying.
Yeah.
Well, in the meantime, before any of that came out, the cardinal had gotten so tired of him bugging him, he exiled him to Indiana. So he became my bishop. So alongside doing the right thing in those cases, he brought along this umbrella, this wide net of anybody gay, this assumption that if a man is gay, then he is actively sexual. And if he is an actively sexual gay man, then of course he's a child molester. So in his mind, all that is together. So when she outed me to him, it was no question what was going to happen. He did, because of the depression. I was diagnosed with major depression and suicidal tendencies. Only because I saw a dead butterfly in a Rorschach test they gave me. It was like, oh, please. So even though when I was in high school, I did have a plan of suicide. And as I told him, because he asked me, I said, when I was in high school, it was very painful. It was very hard. And I told him, but I didn't go through with it. And he didn't catch the humor of that. It was like, obvious.
Yeah, it went completely over his head.
And I told him, I said, it was a joke. That's what's kept me alive a lot of this time. Was a sense of humor and being able to just, crash some very scary things with a laugh. That sometimes that's all I had. And it was like, okay, that's good. So I was sent to a mental institution for 6 months, and I got a host of diagnoses, which some of them prohibited me from returning to active ministry, even though, like I said, laws were not broken, vows were not broken. But it scared him enough to say that you're not coming back. Now, I was prepared because I had some good therapists, and they said, you better prepare yourself for doing something else. So, that's where I got the diagnosis for ADHD, also obsessive compulsive behavior, which I refuse to call a disorder because it is the most ordered thing in the world. My obsessive compulsive. And people call it a disorder who don't have it.
That's so true.
Also, I was diagnosed with dysthymia, which I didn't know what that was until I didn't have it anymore. But that low-grade depression, which I had no idea, like I said, what it was until it was gone. And it was like, oh my God, this weight is off. It was the most amazing thing I've ever experienced. I mean, it was like, I don't know how to describe it, except that I knew what it was when I didn't have it anymore.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So I was honest in therapy, which one of my memoir titles is going to be Screwed by the Truth. I was so honest, scared the hell out of him. I've always been, ever since childhood, I've always been attracted to teenage guys and men. And that has never changed. Now, when I'm 12 and I'm attracted to a 16-year-old, that's no problem. But when I'm 21 and attracted to a 16-year-old, that's a problem. And like I said, you know, by grace, I've never acted on it. And but that, you know, that scares people who don't know the struggle, and they don't know what it takes to keep going day by day. And that's what I learned in therapy also, is that these are my feelings. They're there, and I'm not going to be afraid of them anymore. I'm not going to be ashamed of them anymore. I'm not going to beat myself up because of which, from the time I was, you know, cruising on my bike, watching boys, I was so guilty. I felt so ashamed. And that fear of being found out, you know, especially, it's like, my God, in a locker room. And I've had, you know, crushes on many guys I went to school with, many of my neighbors I grew up with. And it's like, so yeah, it was just so to have now, I had terms for them. I had understanding of them. I had been abused when I was in high school. I had been molested by a friend of the family, a married man who had been a friend of the family, sort of a shirt tail relative. And I never told anybody about that. I had an older cousin. She was at a book signing I did a couple years ago. And she said, "Hey, can I talk to you?" And I said, "Sure." And she goes, "I just want you to know, I know about," she named him. I don't want to name him, just he's dead, long dead, but I just don't need any people guessing. So I heard what happened. And I said, "What?" I said, "I've never told anybody except therapists." And she goes, "No, my mom and dad told me they were really worried that they should have done something when you were a little kid." And I said, "No, that happened when I was in high school." And she tells me this whole thing about her parents, who are my mom's brother and sister-in-law, who suspected this guy because he would take me when I was like probably a toddler and up till I don't remember any of this. He would take me down into his basement.
It's like, it's funny how the memory blocks certain things out.
I have absolutely no idea. And so I had already, when I was in therapy, you know, back in 2006, my therapist had me write a letter to him. And by that time, like I said, he's been dead forever. He was dead by then. And I was prepared to do that because I have recommended that to people who come to me for counseling. I had recommended doing that. Well, so I was prepared. I was not prepared to write it and then read it to him, to an empty chair. And that tore me apart. It was like this release of everything. And it was amazing. I mean, I've never felt so liberated, I think, as that moment, even more than realizing the dysthymia wasn't there. It was like, this was huge. This was like, wow.
It's like, it must have been such a, but I imagine at the same time, really overwhelming to have, you know, when it always feels like once the ball starts rolling and certain memories come back, and especially when you've been in an abusive situation, like I was very lucky as a kid with escaping a pedophile in the neighborhood. And I remember, but I only remembered when I was 26, 27, and this happened when I was around 7 years old. And this guy used to always watch us, and everyone in the neighborhood thought he was odd and strange. But I remember him like leading me to, there used to be like a red alleyway, and you had to go through this alleyway to get back home. And one evening, because I always crossed the alleyway to the other neighborhood to go and see my friends. And one day he was stood there and he was like, "Oh, I have something to show you." Like up this, they called it the Mount. It was like this forested hill where me and my friends would play and like play different games. But his house was behind it. And I guess he was always watching us all this time. And so I was scared, and I knew in that moment, but I followed him out of fear. And I remember him telling me to turn around, and I had this really bad feeling in my stomach, and I just said, my mom's calling me, and ran. And I never told anyone. I didn't tell anyone because I was scared at the time that my dad was going to.
Well, and your dad, yeah.
I was scared. Like the irony, like I was scared my dad was going to go beat him up or something.
Yeah.
And then it's like the memory completely disappeared. But I had these things where I always felt like nervous having someone walking behind me. Like,
right. I remember you referred to that. Yeah.
And yeah, so it's like
the trauma of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes the traumas are like held in, and they come out years later, and it just, once it flooded back to me, like all the memories came back. But for like 2 decades, I pretty much buried it in my mind, but I was having the traumas come out in other ways. So it is such a release, but it's almost overwhelming in the sense of emotion. Like it comes
That's
back.
Funny you said that, because it didn't hit me while I was listening to some of your story, because you've mentioned that, but it just hit me just now. I used to react very, very defensively when a man would put his hand on my shoulder. I would like, jerk it away. When my dad would do it, I would just go off the wall. And I know they both thought I was insane, I'm sure. And when I went, I'm sure both my parents were not surprised when I told them that I was going to a mental institution. I was 42 years old, and I know it was like, oh my God, finally, but my dad said, actually, he said, well, I thought it would happen when you were in Elkhart, which was a bigger parish and much more stress, but I had a huge staff, and I had, it was really challenging in a good way. I was speaking Spanish fluently. It was like I had this huge Anglo population, a big Italian population, and a huge Mexican population. So I was in my element. I mean, it was great. But then I went to Fort Wayne, even though it's a bigger city than South Bend is sort of like a mini Chicago, that it's ethnically mixed. People are just used to different. And Elkhart was similar, not totally the same, but it was similar. But Fort Wayne, twice the size of South Bend, but it was like a small town.
Yeah.
It was like, you don't do anything that's not normal.
Yeah.
So, and this shirt actually I wear in homage to what happened to me in Fort Wayne. My grandmother made this in the 90s.
Yeah.
And it was one of the things that was one of the accusations the woman made, was that he wears clothes that make him look gay on his day off.
Yeah.
And that was this shirt and a pair of white pants. And he told me about that, and he agreed. He goes, why do you wear clothes like that?
Yeah, it's like the things people say.
So when he told me, we were talking about different things and what I had admitted to as far as my attractions, which just scared the hell out of him. That I actually said, yes, I've been attracted to teenagers all my life. My life.
Yeah.
I never acted on it. I told him, some kids in my classes I was teaching. Yeah. And I'm sure I'm not the only one, and I'm sure heterosexual people say the same thing. But I stopped being afraid. I stopped being ashamed of those. I stopped being, crucifying myself for those. But one of the things he asked me, because it came out in therapy, that I had told a couple of my students that I was gay, because they would come to me with the issues. And he said, quote, and this is a direct quote, he goes, how could you be so stupid? And I just looked at him and I go, well, I said, I think I said, I don't know. But then I said, when I was their age, I didn't have anybody like that. I said, and I didn't want anybody going through what I went through if I could help it. And I told him, I said, I'd do it again. So it was just to have, and I have to give him credit. When he told me I was going to a mental institution, He prayed with me. He gave me the sacrament of the sick, which is one of the sacraments in the Catholic Church. I don't know if the Anglicans do that or not.
No,
I don't know if you're familiar with that
no.
group.
No, my mom's never said anything about that.
So he did, and we both cried when we said goodbye. So, I mean, he was who he was. He was of his, he was my parents' age, born of Irish immigrants in Boston, Massachusetts. And that comes with stereotypes that are kind of accurate. Very sexually repressed, very, it's either this or that, you're either burning in hell or you're not, So after the 6 months I got out, I knew I wasn't coming back, and I was kept on insurance and on pay for a year. So that allowed me to find a job, couple jobs. I have a great bill-paying job now at Trader Joe's grocery store, which it's sort of related, though not by anything but blood, but to the Aldi company in Europe. They're sort of distant relatives. So I work for them now almost 17 years, and it's helped give me a life that I can write, because I found out in therapy, I've always loved to write. I mean, when I was in school, I wrote, I still have some of my research papers from junior high on. It helped me in therapy. I had a great therapist who said, you got to reinvent yourself. And he suggested writing. And so I started that in my journal in therapy, and it's been good. So
I fell in love with it from there.
Now almost 18 years. December will be 18 years that I've been in Chicago. And I used to always tell kids when I was, because I was teaching some classes in one of our 4 high schools. And I would always go visit the kids in my elementary school and junior high in the parishes I was assigned. So I'd see them regularly. And I'd always tell them, I said, I can't see myself doing anything else other than priesthood. And it's like, had it been on my decision, I would still be doing it. But I know me, and it's like, no, it's for the best, because I would still have to climb in the closet, anything but private conversations where I could, come out, and it would just lead me back probably to a mental institution again. And it's like, I'm not going to do that to myself. And
it'd be going too far back, because I think when you're only getting glimpses into like your real self and your true life, and then you're going back into
well, it's like you said, when you were on the train and you had just had a great time and you were going back home and you were crying.
I've had like it'd been my first gay night out like ever. It was like this Club Heaven in London, and I'd snuck down on the train. I pretended I was going to a friend's house party, and I was like panicking on the train like back, because my parents were texting like, what time should we pick you up? And I was like, please don't be any delays. But I remember I was just overcome with emotion, because it was like the first time I got to experience it. And as the years went on, 18 to 25, I could only get those glimpses. And I think that's why I struggled when I went to Madrid. Suddenly I was completely out and open for the first time with everyone. And it was celebrated, but I wasn't used to it. I was used to the feelings of shame and hiding things away, and only having glimpses. So I didn't know how to navigate having a fully free like life as a gay man in such an open city, Madrid. And I found it, I wanted to do everything that I hadn't done. And at the same time, as the years sort of went on, it sort of spiraled, because like those things from my childhood would come back, the memories, the divorce of my parents, and finally getting my dad fully out of my life, and all these different parts. And so it was like, I think I always say, like, a part of our life when we finally come out fully, it's like we unpacking the layers of what is truly us from what has been a defense mechanism to protect us from certain aspects. and sort of characters that we'd had to play through life.
That's why I'm a playwright, but I'm a really good actor too.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, and even in teaching, there's like a element of sort of acting, because you've got to be, on and keep the kids engaged.
You have to be engaging. Yeah. Well, and that's how I felt too as a priest with preaching. I would always tell my fellow priests, it's not about entertaining people. It's about engaging them, talking about stuff that's, and that, I think that was part of my gift too, is that I was, even before therapy, I was very tuned into my struggle. And I think people latched onto that. And I was great in the confessional. At the high school, I'd have the longest, not to boast, but I am boasting. I had the longest line of kids who wanted to, I had kids come up to me after school and say they couldn't do it because they had to go back to class. So I stayed after school. And I think a lot of that comes from being tuned into just the at the time, it was still the ugliness and the shame. But it wasn't crippling even back then. It wasn't crippling. But I think that was a lot of it. I was going to say too, I was 23 when I had my first liberated experience. After my first year in seminary, I had gone with this guy who he was a year behind me in college, and we had kind of messed around but didn't do anything. He and his boyfriend were living in Provincetown, Massachusetts. So if you know that, it's the hook where Massachusetts hooks. And so Provincetown is the tip of that hook, and it's this great arts community, LGBTQ community. Back then we would have just said gay, but it's this. And I had my first experience of not having to hide. That it was amazing. I think those, writing that letter to the dead guy, and that those were moments of like, wow, I can see black and white. So it was really. And then the other one was when I told my parents. I was 42, but from their reaction, I knew they had known. But a friend of mine, we're still really close. He's a priest in another part of the country, but we went to school together, seminary. And he had gotten real close with my mom. My mom loved him because they were just always complaining about stuff. And so he knew my whole story. He came out actually when I was in the mental institution. He came out to visit me. So he called me. I was doing some writing at a cafe, and it was right before Christmas, about a week before Christmas. And this would have been in 06. No, it was 07. It was a year later. And he goes, I got a Christmas card from your mother. And he read it to me, and she goes, what's wrong with him? He's still not right. What's going on? He's not telling us everything. And he goes, you still haven't told them, have you? And I said, no. And he goes, well, if you don't, I will. And I said, oh my God, would you please?
Just take that off.
And he goes, well, no, you need to. So I got off the phone with him. I called them, and they both got on the phone, and I told them I was gay. And I told them about some of the stuff that I had been struggling with. And I could tell from their reaction that they had already, because my mother is like me. She's very like explosive if she gets caught off guard by something that she's not prepared for. But she was very calm. Never heard her respond like that before. She goes, oh, okay. And my dad, the first thing he said was it something we did? Which his generation. I mean, he was born in 1931. So it's like there has to be a reason. There has to be a cause. So we talked, and I told them they could tell my two sisters. I'm the middle of two sisters. And but as I tell people, I have to be honest, but being the only boy in an Italian family, it's like being a king. So it was not traumatic for me. But my dad's always been very understanding, even when he didn't understand me. I had all the sort of traditional growing ups of overbearing parents, but nothing abusive. certainly not anything you've experienced. My mom did, and I think that's why she was like how she was, that her father was an alcoholic, and he actually had a near-death experience when he was drinking, and this was before I was born. I never saw him drink. And she said he stopped smoking and stopped drinking and became an actually good father and husband. So, but my grandmother was bigger than him. And so she said my mom said he never raised a finger to any of them because he knew she would beat the hell out of him. Probably twice his size.
Well,
but I knew him as a very nice old man who,
it's like,
so a lot of it, she was the oldest. And so she had a lot of that adult child of alcoholic stuff going on, even when she wasn't an adult. She steered the family in a lot of ways. But so a lot of my obsessive behavior, I think I look at that. One of the things too, if you ever want to get into it, because it really was helpful to me, I had it as a class in seminary, but it's called Family Systems Counseling.
I've heard of that before.
You look at the causes of not just what's going on in the here and now, but what's going on with mom and dad. Why are they like they are? And then it's just this kind of emotional, psychological family tree.
But
anyway.
I can relate to that, because me and my mom, actually, we do have these conversations about how different things have trickled down through the family. Like, we think, grandma has ADHD, or I'm 100% certain of it, but she doesn't recognize even me as having it. Like, it's still, she's 88 in September, so she's but when I think about it in the family, like on my mom's side, like I've got several family members, like from cousins to aunties, that have, and some of my uncles have dealt with depression or with anger issues or with even ADHD. And then on my dad's side, his mom was an alcoholic and she drank herself to the grave. And my dad had always had a really intense anger problem. And for me, when I drink, anger comes out. So I've been myself trying to get on a path of quitting drinking, because what used to be fun for some reason sort of turned when I guess I was out of my relationship. All this resentment I had for my ex, for my dad, for everyone. A fun night out would suddenly be me causing chaos, and I'd be like, why did I do that? Because when I'm not drinking, I'm so good with everyone, but I'm not someone that could have one or two drinks either. It would just steamroll into the night and then ruin everyone's night. Whilst
see, and that's how from stories. That's how my grandfather and uncle was. But thankfully, I don't have that cross. I got other issues, but that's not one of them. But it's And then the dating scene for me has really, I've enjoyed online dating. I think because, I'm still, like I said, I'm attracted to younger guys. Now it's legal age. I tell people if they can kill and be killed for the empire, I can date them. But going to bars, it's just, that's not where I'm going to find somebody. Most likely. So I love, when guys put, age preferences, I like that. I appreciate that. If they're not into older, great. Thanks for telling me, but it is frustrating. Just I think the most frustrating for me, and I've called out Grindr and Tinder on it, is that just the ease that fake profiles and catfish and bots have on those two platforms. I don't know what it is. I never had that on other apps I've used. From Craigslist was amazing. When Craigslist was doing personals, I still I still am in contact with a couple people I met years ago on Craigslist. But there's something about, I don't know what it is, Grindr and Tinder. They're just, you gotta weed out all the fakes, and it's so frustrating.
Yeah, I know it's, and I think it's changed a lot from like when I started using it 10 years ago, and because I didn't feel like it was such a problem then, but now just to converse with someone, there's like so many adverts, and I feel for people as well, because I feel with Grindr, a lot of people who were closeted, for example, would use the fake GPS. And I've used it myself before I moved to Madrid, before I moved to Barcelona, to kind of get to talk to people around the area. And they blocked it last year in May. And so a lot of complaints from people nowadays are, well, my safety's gone because I was always using that fake GPS. And now you put up a paywall, but that can kind of do it, but you're still not able to have that anonymity.
Anonymity, yeah. That's, I never thought of it, because I always thought, you know, with the GPS, it always gave catfish the ability to lie where they were. And it's like, okay, you're not a mile away from me, you're 5,000 miles away from me. I never thought of it the other way, though.
It's like, for me, I would, like, if I was planning, like, even back in the UK, a night out in Manchester or London, like, I'd already, and make friends as well through doing that, because in my town, you know, it was just all blank profiles. It still is to this day. And blank profiles and catfish pretty much in my town. So when I go back there, it's like, I'm like, thank God I left Spain.
One thing too that reminded me, I was thinking about it when Pat and you were talking, just about the inner critic, and a term I've used, which is very helpful, is my inner jackass. I have to suppress my inner jackass, and that's helped me a lot, both writing, you know, and getting so many rejection letters on manuscripts and stuff like that. But also, I joke with people, I said, I am a strong person because of submitting manuscripts and online dating. So that they both have
it's like, but I think in the present day, like the dating life in general, it's even outside of the apps, I think, probably because I've always grown up with social media and that era as well, it's like, I notice people don't typically like approach each other, you know, in bars very often anymore. They will talk through Grindr on the phone and message rather than approaching and so I've tried to sort of distance myself from that sort of environment by going in. I'm not sure if they have it in the US, but we have an app like Meetup. That's very
I got into writers groups through that.
Nice. So through that you can find like actual events to attend and for the community, and that's how I ended up, you know, getting to meet a lot of the people I've met in Barcelona, because for me, getting those connections back, like authentically in person, especially after COVID, those sort of years where we were locked up and it felt like everything was online. It's like going back into the dating world and everything. It can be daunting at times.
It's that, and it's like, for me, it's like setting up book events, you know, for book signings. It's like, I was going strong, and then the pandemic, and it's like, okay, I wasn't doing anything virtual, but now it's like I'm just beginning to see better attendance like it was before 2020. But also, you know, having a job, you know, at Trader Joe's, it's like we were never virtual. We were all, and it was so surreal sometimes I take public transportation everywhere. I don't have a car. And sometimes I'd have an entire train car, one car out of the 8. I was in there and no one else was. Or maybe, you know, a homeless person sleeping or something. But then having that, my regular job, not changing at all. But also that reminded me too, you and Pat were talking about, you know, meeting someone in the grocery store. So I have a good friend who works with me. He and his boyfriend met in the aisle.
Oh, really?
Yes. I hate him for it. I hate him for it.
Yeah, I keep hoping that's gonna happen with my mom, that she's just gonna meet someone because she's like, I'm off the app, so I'm not going on anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like I don't know. I don't know how you feel with yourself now when it comes to dating, but with me, I'm very open. When I meet someone, I'm like, look, I remember I started my most recent job and I'd always hid things in the past. Like, for example, my most recent job, on the first day when it was the introductions, I was like, I'm gay, I've got ADHD. And yeah, I'm releasing a queer podcast and just put it all out there.
That's great.
Then I'm like, no one can. And I'm the same when I meet guys now. It's like I used to have, I don't know if you felt the same, but the fear of a secondary rejection, not from my sexuality, but from my ADHD as well, and my sort of tics and anxiety that comes with it, would make me very socially anxious. And so I wouldn't be fully able to maybe be myself when I was meeting someone before. Whilst now I just blurt it all out. I'm like, take it or leave it. That's funny.
That's good. No, I kind of, my secondary rejection would be from being too much me. Like just so some people just can't handle that. So I learned to kind of moderate my I don't know, my energy, my enthusiasm, whatever it is.
But I think though, in the present though, what you're doing, it's I mean, when you look back, like your diary and the chapters, like, and how far you've come, it's like, and it's still like going now into, you know, you're getting to have all these amazing opportunities. It must be so exciting, like October coming up. And
well, and you are such an inspiration, because I've always wanted to do a podcast, and I joked actually with that guy who's dating the guy he met. He and I are older, and I said we should do a podcast on gay dating in the 80s, even though he was much more out than I was, but it would be still a neat, gay guy closeted dating girls, you know. So but you are an inspiration. So
no, well, thank you so much for coming on as well, because I think your story will resonate with a lot of people. And I think, you know, we go through these really difficult pages and chapters of our lives, but it's so great that you are able to live, you know, as your authentic self and wear that shirt. And you know, and I think
my grandma lived to be 103, by the way.
So it's like you know, it's a process for everyone. It's like everyone finds and then unpeels like the layers of the onion and the chameleon, as I call it, as they go. But once you get that liberation and freedom, I think it's such a weight lifted. And I can sense it for you.
With people listening to this, you know, if they're not out yet, that you know, a lot of times what's in our head is a lot worse than what reality can be. But just even if it's not wanting to risk it, just find one or two people who you can just step out a little bit to. You know, I think it's worth it just for that breathing space that you'd have, you know, with your friends who knew, the lesbian friends, you know, that at least that was a breathing space for you. You didn't have to keep everything in. And I went to one of my reunions. It was my 30th reunion, high school. I had my 40th last year. So, but my 30th reunion, I was helping set up. So we had, you know, some of the girls were there, and now women, but they were, you know, the popular girls, and we were chatting about stuff. And they asked me what happened because I was just out of the priesthood. It was, and they said, what happened? And I said, well, it was an emotional thing. And I said, I'm gay, and somebody outed me. And one of the girls, she goes, well, we knew that. It's like, all right, would have been helpful to know. But even, and I was very honest, I thought, even if they would have told me, you know, in the early 80s that they think I was gay, I so much denial. I mean, it would, but no.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Like at the time, like in school, like when I think back, I think probably more so because I witnessed bullying of a guy that came. He had the courage to come out at 14, but he
That
was
is amazing.
horrendously bullied
That
for
is
it.
amazing.
And like from kids throwing like eggs at him, like to purposely when he'd be walking out of school to kicking the football so it would hit him.
Yeah.
And so that made me, you know, have such a like if anyone had like the slight suspicion, and a lot of people did in my school, and but I just shut it down completely.
Right. And that's in the 21st century.
So it's like I was I remember 2006 being like I was very scared, seeing what was happening to him, and also wanting to help him and relate to him and say to him that I'm gay too. But I was terrified that seeing what was happening to him, like that it would spread around the whole school. Whilst ironically, years later, like when I was teaching in Madrid, so I taught a lot of university age, so a lot of them were around 18. So some of them were already on the apps and ended up finding me, and even in a gay club. So I was like outed to the school. I was like, well, I don't care now. I'm like, yeah, it's true. But back in school, it was such a I mean,
such
here in
trauma,
Spain,
have been, and that was funny you said that, because I was on I think it was Grindr or Tinder or one other app, but it was a couple years ago, and I got a text from a guy that said, Father Joe.
Yeah.
And he said, you know, I knew you in Elkhart. I was a little kid. I had such a crush on you.
Like, really?
Oh, kid, been there.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, how life works out?
And
it's like when you look back, you know, at all the different eras and how we felt then to versus now. Now it's like, you know, and it's still, we still have, you know, challenges and those people that we, you know, like you were saying, that just sometimes you've got to let certain people out of your life. I've had that this year with a lot of people, and I think then you just reach a point where once you're feeling that happiness on your own as well, that everything starts to align and you find something you're passionate about. And yeah, it sounds like for you, everything's, well, it's going to be a busy next few months, right?
It will be. We had our auditions a couple weeks ago, so we have the cast, and then we did the table read on Sunday, and now we start rehearsals on September 1st, so we'll go 6 weeks hard, and then
so it's like a countdown now. But no, that's super awesome, and thank you so much, honestly, for coming on and sharing.
Thanks for your response so quickly. Like I said, it was very timely for me emotionally, so I appreciate your reaching out and doing this. So
it's always, I think it's always really great when people can feel comfortable to really share their, you know, their journey, as they call it, their queerness diary. And so thank you for being so open and so honest and coming on the podcast.
If you ever find yourself in Chicago, let me know. I do tours, actually, some of the labor history sites in Chicago. I do.
Oh, tours. Nice.
So the info's on my website. So little plug for the business.
That's awesome. So thanks so much for coming on today. And so to all my listeners, thank you for tuning in, and we'll be back with another Queerness Diary episode next week. So thanks so much, Joseph.
Oh, thank you. Bye.
Right. So